Defuse.
Welcome to another episode of Press 4 to Defuse, where we're going to be your weekly source for Valorant esports news and discussion. I just got to say, I like seeing that intro video because it does remind me that eventually my hair will get back to looking okay. One day. It'll happen. It'll happen. I'm Darth Mike. This is Sam and Paul, usual suspects here. How are we doing today? Sam, how are you feeling today?
I'm in such a great mood. Got a new tattoo. It's a dragon. You can't really see it too well, but it's amazing. Been spending a lot of time on a farm far away from civilization, which has been fantastic. And of course, it's Wednesday, so press 4 to Defuse day.
There you go. Hump day, my dudes. How are you feeling, Paul?
I'm feeling the Valorant like infused into my system, right?
Seriously.
Look, we got a little bit of like chill at the beginning of the year, which was good because we had a lot of news to catch back up on. And then we're getting into the year now, and now everything's starting up. There's like 4 events in the next week that are all like A-tier events. It is a busy time, and that means it's a good time.
Well, let's dive into the news. We've got our first segment, Run It Back, where we talked about the news from the week, and there is quite a bit that's happened, actually. So let's talk about it. Some of these are just announcements of things that we already knew. This first one is certainly that. 100 Thieves finally announced their roster. It is, in fact, the roster that we thought it was going to be. Asuna, Hiko, and Ethan returning. Eccles and Baby J into the roster. Eccles, assuming calling duties, has just gotten into the United States. Baby J will be moving on. And Joey's been promoted to head coach. He was formerly, I think, their analyst / assistant coach. They fired Frost, and Jovi seems to be moving to the role. So they're keeping it in-house. How do we feel about this roster? Let's start with you, Paul.
I'm feeling pretty good about it. If for no other reason than just seeing Baby J like celebrate so heavily on Twitter. I didn't realize that it was such a goal of his to get on 100 Thieves, but like this announcement came out and he was just like blowing up his Twitter with how happy he was. So I'm glad for him, if nothing else. But I mean, on paper, this lineup should just be absolutely insane, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason that this lineup shouldn't be top 4, which is good because they got invited into top 4 for VCT. So these guys should be absolutely nuts. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up being like the top team, if not like first or second here. Eccles calling is going to be really interesting. And I think it's really cool too that they kept the coaching in-house, because that to me says like, okay, we were, despite the insane off season that 100 Thieves had, it says to me that they were at least mostly comfortable with the direction the team was heading, and they liked the elements, and they're figuring out which elements of the team that they actually want to move forward with and what parts of their roster they want to pivot around, like keeping, Asuna and Hiko around, obviously. So I'm really excited for this 100 Thieves team. I was worried in the offseason with how crazy the news always, I felt like every week we just had more like outlandish 100 Thieves roster moves. But now that we're here, now that VCT starts next week, I guess not for them, but for everybody else, I'm excited for this roster.
Mid-February for them. Sam, how do you feel about this 100 Thieves squad?
So I think that, lucky isn't the word. They work their asses off. But it's lucky that they get invited as one of the top 4, because I think that, if I'm not mistaken, they only have 2 players from the original roster, which like is it 3? Okay, then they're good. Because I know like if you change too much of your roster, then you like forfeit all of your VCT points or whatever. There's a bit of a stuff up there. So okay, but that's good. The other thing is, I like that this isn't like a full monkey squad. We'd been kind of talking about that and how we were a little worried about them having like 5 firecracker players. It was a similar thing with FaZe. And it's nice to see that there is quite a bit of stability, not just with Hiko, who's always been there, and we know has always been like a good, stable brain behind the players, but now they bring in Eccles as well, which, first and foremost, poaching all the EU players. You know what? If you can't beat him, poach him. And so they bring him in as well for the extra little bit of control there. And again, bringing in Baby J for that firepower. I think that this squad is going to be a serious force to be reckoned with this year. I mean, 100 Thieves have never been a team to really like stick your nose up at, but they've always been one of those kind of precipice teams, and then they kind of surged towards the end of the year, but they weren't able to quite get over the finish line. Now with this new roster, I think that they have a lot to kind of prove, and I think that they have all the tools to do it.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to paint all the ways that this can go wrong. Because
Sure.
I think that it's an interesting potential roster, but I think there are a lot of potential pitfalls. The first thing is bringing in a new IGL is always going to be an adjustment, right? Bringing in a new IGL to an established roster is always going to be more of an adjustment. This is not Eccles' team. This is Hiko's team, realistically, if it's anyone's team. But the core of Asuna, Hiko, and Ethan are all guys who've, I mean, two of them, Asuna and Hiko, have been on a team for a while now together. Ethan's been there since last spring. Like, there's a lot of knowledge between these players. There's a lot of experience between these players, and they all have a CS background. Hiko and Ethan, obviously being much more established in that sense, they're veterans, realistically, of FPS, Hiko in particular. Asuna a little bit more of a newer face. He never reached the same level in CS before making his transition over to Valorant. Much younger player, obviously. But here's where this can go wrong. Whenever you're bringing in a new calling system, one of the first things you have to do is have people trust and respect the calls. There has to be buy-in. You have to be unified in the way that you're playing. Now, a guy like Hiko, who's called for rosters in the past, who's contributed, who's probably playing as a bit of a second caller on this roster, I would assume, you can maybe have those friction moments where it's like, well, I don't think we should play the game that way. Well, but this is the system. So the question for me about this roster is, how well is Eccles going to be able to implement his vision as an in-game leader? How much respect is he going to have? How much rope is he going to have from these players as well? Because yes, he's a move over EU player, and that's exciting. Everyone likes to poach the EU players, but he does not have the same Counter-Strike background that these guys would inherently respect. He doesn't have the same established background, and he was removed from Liquid because of a lack of firepower. Right? Like, we got to remember, there was a reason he was removed from that team. Everyone on that team liked him. Everyone on that team thought he was a decent caller. But at the end of the day, he did not bring the firepower that they were looking for. And that was a big part of why he was removed. So, to me, everything about this move hinges on Eccles. They've gone out. They've gotten the EU guy. They've imported him. They've gone through the trouble of getting him a visa and everything. How well is his system going to come in? How much respect is he going to be given by the other players? How much buy-in is there going to be? Especially if you have... And I know literally nothing about the coaching staff, but if they were analysts who are being promoted to their first time coaching role or that kind of thing, it doesn't speak to, like, everything about this roster tells me that the strong voice in the roster is probably Hiko. The guy who probably calls the shots is Hiko. And it has been that way really since the beginning. Like, they built this roster around him, so that makes sense. But it means that if Hiko doesn't buy in for any reason, even if it's just a subconscious doubt in his mind, it can lead to huge problems down the line for this squad.
Sure.
The other thing that might be somewhat minor to kind of get over, but when we spoke to Anders shortly after he was announced to Fnatic, and we were talking about, okay, so EU versus NA, what are the big differences? What are kind of the challenges? And he was talking about, like, there are set plays that you know about in NA scrims, and you'll call that play and everyone knows what you're doing. And he went to EU and he tried to call a play and all the players just went, what? We don't, what is that? What? We don't do that. What is that? What? So there's that thing. And in the heat of the moment, there's always that possibility that you're going to fall back on your previous knowledge, and then you'll mention like a play or whatever, and then everyone's going to go, the what now? So hopefully there's enough time to kind of, I don't know, not beat it out of him, but just give him a chance to work through the potential kinks in that, because that could also become slightly problematic.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. We'll move on here. But I think that there's a lot of reason to be excited about this 100 Thieves roster, and there's also a ton of reasons to be cautious. And it's one of those things where it could work brilliantly, and it could be a disaster. I don't think this squad is going to be mediocre, is the way I'll put it. I think it'll either be good or dead pretty quickly. Moving on here. Our next story here, XX10, I just wanted to say that. They've got a new org. It's an org called Xerxia.
What is that post?
Thai org, obviously. And I guess they make announcements on Facebook.
Actually, so this is actually a really, first off, that poster is amazing.
It's dope.
Absolutely amazing.
It looks like a Marvel movie.
It does. It does. I don't know what's going on in the middle there with those glasses, but so the Facebook thing I think is actually like just like a Southeast Asia or a Thailand thing.
That makes sense.
I remember when I was casting SEA last January. Wow, a year ago. Wow, that's weird. I was trying to do research on the teams, and none of them had a Twitter, but all of them had a Facebook. So I think that's just an SEA thing.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they found another org. Because even without Patapan, right? Even now he's moving over to get the bag in Overwatch. These 5 were still like 5 of the best Southeast Asia players before Patapan. They stumbled a little bit while like they had Patapan and then they lost him to an injury and they were like, whoops, we adjusted our style around our one carry player, forgot how to play the game otherwise. But then they got him back. I'm a little bit nervous for this team still now that they have to move on without him. But overall, I'm excited that they found somewhere that they can actually like all stay together as a group because they work really well together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see
echoed.
it. I'm very curious to see if they are anything without Patapan. Like, that's just the thing. They haven't been so far. Like, they weren't when he was out. So we'll see.
They were before him, though. Like,
that
they were the best team in Southeast Asia.
Ago, man.
That was a year ago. So, you know, they're not even a grain of salt. You have to put, like, the whole packet on the plate for that one. But I like those guys. They're funny.
You love the SEA boys. You always do.
I do love my SEA boys.
Yeah.
All right, moving on here. On to the next announcement. This one was a bit of a surprise. The Guard have announced their 5th player. It's Trent, formerly known as Habib. If you don't know who this is, you're in good company. Nobody really knows who this is. This is a very unknown player, 17 years old, cracked out youngster.
Another crack teenager.
I have a bit of a scoop on this because I just asked MCE, having seen this very surprising pickup. The message I sent him was literally, tell me about the new child soldier that you recruited, because I did not expect him to pick up someone so young. It doesn't really match with what I think he was probably looking for from the Sova role. Obviously, this is replacing Psalm, who's a much older, more experienced player, but who they decided wasn't up to snuff for what they were looking for. So to talk about what MCE saw with him, literally, apparently the reason why they scrimmed him and they trialed him is because they played him in a scrim and he destroyed them. And they were like, okay, like almost as a joke, like, all right, let's trial this guy that no one's heard of. And then as soon as they were playing with him, they started to love what they were seeing. There's a lot there. First of all, the individual skill, he's apparently just dropping numbers on people, which you'll see as well in their Nerd Street matchups. I was following along with that yesterday because I was so curious. And apparently the mentality is really impressive for such a young player. This is, I feel like I have to say this anytime I talk about an MCE team, but I am a huge MCE fan. I have been through his career in CS and in Valorant, so that is my bias. Take it as you will, but I will always put a lot of stock in MC's words, and he is blown away by this guy. He really is. He thinks he has the future top-tier pro mentality. He thinks that the way that he's thinking about the game is far advanced for being so young. Like, basically, he went into the trial and the knowing of this guy thinking, we don't want to pick up a minor, we don't want to pick up someone that young, like completely biased against him, and was so blown away by Trent that he had to have him on the team, wanted him on the team. Sure. So he's apparently been dropping dimes and like crazy numbers in scrims. There's a lot to be excited about it. And so this is going to be interesting. It does put even more of the burden of developing on this team on the coaching position, just because they're a very inexperienced team. Apart from like Jonah P and Valen, there's really like, I mean, there's very little XP on this squad. I mean, obviously say a player, but
and even Jonah P and Valen are still really young.
Yes.
Right. Like comparatively to guys like Psalm. Right. And that's my, so
everyone
you're really hyped on this. Fair enough.
Jeez, man. What about Hiko?
I was about to say, but that's my, since you're hyped on this team, now I get to play the bad guy.
Go for it.
That's my thing about this team is I feel like, you know, the Guard had they had one tournament, right? And they didn't do that well. And Psalm immediately hit the bench, right?
Yeah.
Like they were immediately making roster changes, which I'm not against because they've looked better now that they've added Trent in. So it worked. You get a pass on that one, but I don't want to see if the Guard don't do well in the first or second VCT qualifiers, I don't want to see this roster explode, right? It's a young roster. Give them time to develop. If they mess up the first VCT and we see changes again, then I'm worried about like the org. Then I'm worried about like, okay, who's making these decisions to just have a revolving door of players? Now, again, that's a big if. We're pretty early in the Guard's lifespan.
Yeah.
I'll cut him some slack for now, but you know, they played for like a week and then immediately benched a player, which makes me nervous a little bit.
Here's
I mean,
I feel like based on the insight you've given us from NCE, maybe that was just like a timing thing, right? Like they didn't do well, and then maybe the Trent thing lined up with that.
No.
Like...
They cut Solomon, then they found Trent. What happened
okay.
is basically MC wasn't in the roster when Solomon was signed, right? Solomon was one of the first 3 players before they actually had a roster, before they played anything. So you can't trial players at that point. You don't have a team to trial them on. They just signed 3 players and then started to build the roster from there. And then once they actually started playing, Solomon wasn't cutting it. Per my understanding, he wasn't. Once he was actually in a roster, they did not like the way it looked, and so he was removed. It's not the kind of thing where they're going to make moves all the time. I don't think. It's more that
Hopefully not.
You got the first look at how this team actually works, and you went, okay, this piece isn't what we're looking for.
For sure, and I just want them to be in it for the long run.
Yeah.
If you're gonna get young talent, if you're gonna get talent with like not a huge amount of CS background, but guys like Saya player who are just so insanely cracked mechanically. I just want them to give it time.
How old is Saya player?
I think he's like 22 or 23.
So yeah, he's 23. I thought he might be a little older because he has the
Wait,
owl
is
experience.
the age restriction still 18 for VCT? The age?
I thought it was 16.
I think it's 16.
Is it 16?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty
Cool.
sure it's 16.
I think so.
Because otherwise,
that makes more
Zekin
sense.
wouldn't be able to play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes
I think
more
it's always
sense
been
then.
16. Because I think the age limit for the
nice.
game is theoretically 16 in a lot of places.
Theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, I click the button that says I'm over X age or whatever. You know,
exactly.
It's a free game on the internet. People
I have
Nobody
read and
tell
agreed to the
Redux.
terms and conditions. Like,
Yeah. All right. Moving on here, I'm very excited to see how the squad's doing. They're doing very nicely in the latest Nerd Street event, so watch them tonight for the final in that. They are playing T1, I think, in the next matchup.
Oh, that's gonna be spicy.
Which will be,
In semis,
That'll
be
a
very
really
telling
fun game. That's going to
for
be
both those squads, actually.
That's going to be at 5 p.m. tonight. So be sure to tune into that one. That'll be on, I think, either this channel or the G4 channel. I don't know. Actually, I'd guess they're doing that one on the G4 channel. So check that out on the G4 channel.
Yeah, this will be the B stream.
Yeah.
That's got to be a spicy as hell matchup, T1 versus the Guard. I mean, that's got to be fun. So be sure to tune into that one. I think that'll be a really good pulse check on both squads, really.
Yeah.
So that should be fun. Moving on. NIP goes to Brazil. I really only know Shan from this roster. Does anyone have any big insight on the new NIP roster?
Not really.
I feel like Brazil is the one region that we don't have an expert, or like even a pseudo expert on.
Yeah.
Right? Like every other region will have someone who at least keeps their eyes on it.
I mean,
Luck
Brazil
NIP.
is America, Mike. I'm looking at you here for this one.
It is so far distanced from America.
Paul's in NA too.
Well, it's in South America. I mean,
Yeah, if anything, I'm closer to Brazil geologically, I think.
No,
I'm nowhere near.
probably
Although you're
not.
more east than me.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
I'm substantially more east than you. I think I'm more in line with them.
Vertically.
Up, down, north,
You're
south.
almost on the time zone.
And
I think they're
you're-
one ahead of you. Either way, good luck NIP. They have a huge, we talked about this a month ago or whatever. They have a huge fan base over there, right? So,
yeah.
I wasn't familiar with any of the players, but I hope they picked. Those better be good Brazilian players because NIP is going to have a lot to shoulder, cutting their whole EU roster, uprooting everything to Brazil. Their fan base is really big in Brazil too, so if they flop out, that's going to be rough.
It'll be interesting. Again, Chand, I think, is the only player we should be familiar with. He's coming over from Furia. He has a CS background as well. Played on a few different rosters in CS that were relevant. So he's got the XP and he's IGLing for this roster. So that'll be interesting to see what they can do. Obviously, I mean, look, last Champions run, I think we all gained a lot more respect for LATAM and Brazil as a region.
Oh yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see who can make it out of that back to international competition this time around. Ghost, moving on. Ghost have announced a roster. This is, again, I think this roster was kind of known.
Yeah.
Brock, John QT, Nismo, Koala Noob, Ryan. I think a good chunk of that is sticking over from the last Ghost roster. Kaplan's still there coaching / apparently playing Yoru. Yeah, we got any interest in this Ghost roster?
I've seen these guys play a few times. Koala Noob, I will always have respect for. The guy is a really cracked out jet, and I think him and Nismo actually play really well together. So I'm excited to see what these guys can do. I mean, I don't think they're going to be pushing for like top 5 NA or anything crazy, but there are very good players on this team, and they've been playing with this roster through like a bunch of the last month and a half or so through like opens and NSGs and stuff. So I'm excited to see what they can do.
Brock and Ryan are actually 2 players that I'm looking out for, because Brock, he really caught my eye. I think he was on Complexity for a while,
yeah.
I think. Complexity, yeah. And he really caught my eye there. And then it was Kaplan as well. Not Kaplan. Ryan, who I think he kind of debuted in Dignitas towards the beginning of last year, and then kind of Dignitas went boom, and he went from like team to team to team. But he's always, in my opinion, been pretty consistent and been pretty good. So I think that this roster has a ton of potential. I don't know if it's, like, to be perfectly frank, I don't see this kind of nipping at any T1 heels, but I think that this is a really good roster to do well in the Tier 2 scene and kind of start building themselves up from there.
I think it's a good roster to end up like Anbox, where they do really better than expected, and then all the players get bought out.
That's probably true. I could see them getting going. I mean, there's a lot of young talent on this. Guys like Koala Noob, guys like Brock, John QT. I mean, these are all like young, talented players. The only one who really has any veterancy is Ryan, and even that's funny to me because I remember when he was just coming up as a young whippersnapper in CS. But I'm old. In Valorant terms, he's experienced as hell.
Sure.
In real human years, he's still a young buck. But esports years aren't real people years.
They're like dog years. So you got to multiply them by 7.
Yeah, pretty much. Moving on here. Next move, we're hopping across the pond. G2.
This
Carlos
was hilarious. This was
lying.
so funny.
Carlos wasn't lying. He said if they didn't make it out, it was Kelox was back on the roster, and it happened. Also, last show, you'll remember we had a conversation where I said, how much rope does Mixwell have left? Turns out, not a lot.
Not much.
Not a lot at all. Mixwell gone. Sam, how you feel about this?
I thought it was hilarious, and I felt so bad for poor Kelox as well, because he gets benched, and it's just like, can you imagine being him and like sitting back watching the team not doing well, and then waiting for the phone call to be like, yo, we need you in. Like, I've been expecting you. No, seriously.
Meme. You must be truly desperate to come to me
Well,
for help.
I was gonna say like the Captain America in Endgame kind of thing, right? Like in Infinity War.
Get this man
he's
a
been like
shield.
in hiding, right? And he catches the spear and he walks out and everybody cheers.
Yep.
You have an army, we have a Kelox. I love all the Marvel memes. We need to keep this going. Anyway,
now let's see if they get eliminated.
They looked a lot better with Kelox. And we were just talking before the show started. They were doing really well. I think they made it to like the quarterfinals of the next of stage 2. So looking pretty good. And you guys are saying they're playing like some kind of Omega LOL team. So no massive competition as yet, but definitely already looking a lot better. And for G2, I mean, if they don't make it, then for them to drop down to the VRLs is not an ideal situation for an org like G2. Like, they are not going to be happy with that by any stretch of the imagination. So this is really, I don't want to call it a Hail Mary, because like Kelox has been there all along. It's not like he's some new player that they're like hinging all of their hopes on. But they've made a lot of changes in a short period of time to try and make up for this deficit that they've had for over a year. And it feels like they're getting closer to reaching that sweet spot. And I'm kind of hoping this is it, but at the same time, it'll be really funny to watch them crash and burn again. I don't know. I'm of 2 minds.
G2 is always just a fun team to watch, because no matter what happens, their Twitter game is going to be fire.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what happens, it's going to be hilarious to watch. But I do think, speaking from like a storyline perspective, this is such a weird place for G2 to be in, right? Like, you think about 6 months ago comparatively, and now we're talking about, will they make it through an open bracket where they don't play anybody of any relevance? Will they actually qualify for VCT?
Yeah.
Right?
God.
When this was a team that, like, beat Sentinels at Berlin and everybody lost their minds, right? Like, it's such a weird spot for them to have gotten to.
It just, I mean, going back to what you were saying about the guard, like, what the hell's the plan with this team, man? Like, who is making the calls? Because it just feels like, we lost this. slot a couple more names in. I mean, like the only identity that this team has had over its tenure, it has been Mixwell. And now he's gone.
Yeah.
And
They
now he's
built the
benched.
team around Mixwell. He was their star player. He was their golden boy. Now he's out. I don't think that's unreasonable. Like, I don't think he's been carrying water for how much his name brand is. I think
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him stick around G2 and transition into streaming. I know he's got a huge platform in that regard, huge in Spain. But like, what are you doing, guys? Like, is there a plan, or is it just like, this is the next hot name, let's pick up the next hot name? Now they picked up Hoodie and Meadow. That was their big plan going into this year, right? But then you're like, well, we don't really know out of Mixwell and Kellogg's. Do we want Kellogg's who's calling, or do we want Mixwell who's got the name? Let's give Mixwell one more chance. Now we're swapping Kellogg's in. Like, I hope for the players' sake that they make it out of this qualifier just so they can fucking have the same teammates for a week. I mean, god damn.
Oh my god.
So yeah, I don't know. That's where I feel. It's a weird team because I know G2 in most esports, their logic is buy out the stars, buy the big names, make it happen.
That has not worked very well for them in Valorant. Holy.
Well, it's not an established. It's not an established thing. Who do you go poach? They went and poached Heretics.
Yeah.
Who the fuck are Heretics?
Didn't even work.
Like, you know, there are no established names. There's not a big enough history of the game to have the established names here, right?
Yeah.
So it's like either you're gonna poach big names from CS, which that was the Mixwell signing, which didn't go so hot. Obviously, in sum total, he was good for a very long time. I don't want to discredit that.
Yeah.
But, you know, but it's just
at the beginning of a game's lifespan, you don't know who's gonna actually transition extremely well.
So it just feels like G2's in this weird place where they're just gonna keep making moves until like a year from now when they can just buy some really big players and then try and build a team around that. I don't know.
Maybe they'll stop
this is the
poaching
magic
NA
formula.
players.
I just
That'd be so funny.
That would be hilarious, dude.
They like poach Shazam or Tens or something off Sentinels.
I mean, that would be
Like,
the most
ha!
G2 thing to do to buy tens.
It would be so
would be
funny.
so
It wouldn't be
I would love
Shazam. It
it.
would be tens. If it's
Yeah.
G2,
Oh, yeah.
they would buy tens. They don't buy the that'd
Bro,
be amazing.
Can you
Could they
imagine the
afford-
memes?
Could they afford? I mean, G2's
Dude,
a really
they
big
just
org,
spent
don't get me
like
wrong, but you
hundreds
gotta
of thousands of
imagine-
dollars.
They
on
hired
kid
a plane to say fuck Sentinels.
They just
That's
bought a kid
true.
for I think $600,000, some absurd number in CS, who literally is a youngster who's never played at tier 1 before. He's a 16-year-old prodigy prospect that they just bought out. G2 has got the dosh. Don't worry about that.
I feel like
Seriously.
no matter what happens, you can just like you just look at how Carlos exists, and it explains a lot of G2, right?
Yes.
Carlos is an agent of chaos,
Yeah.
and it explains a lot of how G2 operates.
Madness. All right, moving on here. Moving on. We'll see if plus Kellogg's is a magic formula. Look, if they can't beat human tripwires, like they deserve another roster move. But,
Their
you know.
bracket is like to get out of this second qualifier is super free too. So
Yeah.
if they
Well,
flop
okay,
out, that's
they
a
are
tragedy.
playing Yonk next, which they should theoretically be able to beat quite easily because that's Bonkar and Yassine and their new team.
Sure.
But I mean, they should still win that.
They should shit stomp them, yes.
Yeah,
Look,
should.
I
Anyways,
get that
moving
Valorant
on.
is a lot more random than perhaps other titles in terms of like a one upset can happen, but like, come on. That's a lot of
And it
upsets
is-
for G2 if that's your
Better call them
justification
choke
going
two
on.
for nothing.
All right, moving on. David P's in for OG. Probably not anymore because he was in for a trial and then they stunk it up in the qualifier. So we'll see if that sticks around. But David P was coming in. Matillion was moved to the bench. I don't know. Do we care?
Not really. I mean, they didn't make it. So see you in the
Yeah, I was
DLRs,
gonna
buddy.
say.
I
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say now it's kind of like an anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
OG felt, maybe they like how David P played and they sub out somebody else. Maybe, this was just an emergency sub and they were never really looking for him anyways. They have some time to figure it out now,
Yeah.
at the very least for OG.
Yeah, they do.
Not really. VRL start like next week.
Well, they don't have that much time. All right. I
Up
mean,
to.
whatever. We'll see what they actually field the next time they field it. Moving on here. Moving on. OG hasn't. They need to do more stuff. We had an update coming in. The Ares got nerfed. Praise. I was gonna bitch so much about the state of the Ares if it hadn't been nerfed. So yeah, there we go. I just
Thank
want to say,
God.
I was thinking about it the last patch. I realized it was pretty ironic that the buffs that they did to guns were like the Guardian, the Bulldog, like all these more precision-based eco weapons. But then the buff they
And then
made to
the
the Ares made
Ares.
all of them irrelevant because the Ares was so
Yep.
good. Why would you buy anything else? So here's the buff. They make it a little more expensive, and they basically up the recoil in a major way. It recoils. It spreads more heavily. Actually, it spreads less heavily, but it has greater pitch recoil.
Yeah. I think this is the change that it needed. I'd still maybe like to see them tweak the fire rate a little bit, but we'll see how this one goes first. I'm okay with this change for now at the very least. They upped it to 1600 too, which is also good because it was just cheaper than the Spectre and better than the Spectre. So there was no reason to ever buy the Spectre now.
Now it's the
I
same
think
price
this
as the
pivots-
Spectre and better than the Spectre.
True, but I think this pivots more toward like what you want to see from the Valorant, like the non-primary guns, like things outside of the Op, the Vandal, the Phantom, right? Where you want to see them being like guns that are each good situationally for different things, right? Like now, if I have $1,600 and I want to play a close like corner, I'll pick up like a Spectre, right? I'll try and take fights with that. If I just want to spam through a wall, or I want to play more long range and I don't have enough for like a Bulldog or a Guardian, now I'll pick up an Ares, right? In theory, at least. I haven't had the chance to go on and mess around with this Ares and see if it's just still, broken despite the nerfs. But in theory, this is a good movement toward guns being situational for their price.
Honestly, to me, the biggest thing about this patch is that Wide Joy has been removed, which is very sad. It was apparently it was a bug, so they had to fix it, but they have acknowledged that the community loves Wide Joy, so I don't know, maybe they're gonna like throw in a spray or something for Wide Joy.
They'll find a way to make you pay for her.
Pay for Wide Joy. Put it in the battle pass.
It'll be in the next bundle.
Yeah.
There you go. The Wide Joy spray.
The next Valorant Go bundle.
Wide Joy
Vandal.
Vandal.
Do a Valorant Go Volume 3, and it'll just be like a banner.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a Wide Joy on the Odin. I think that would be perfect.
That would be really funny, actually. I actually would get that skin.
I endorse that. Right? There you go. We come up with all the good ideas on this show.
I want a commission. We need a commission. What I will say about the Ares is I still think it's better than Spectre. I think it's more that this balance makes it more so that it's less viable to buy an Ares than to buy a Guardian or a Bulldog in situations where you actually want the range. But for close up, a million big bullets is always going to be better. You don't need to worry about recoil if someone's just cornering and you're spamming the heck out of them.
That's a good point.
But I don't know. We'll see. We will see. It's been getting played a lot in the games that I've been watching for the NSG Open, so we'll see if that affects its rate at all.
And NSG Open's on like live patch, right? So like this will be live for the games today.
Yeah.
That's a good question, actually. Whether since the tournament's already started, they keep the patch or if they go live. I think.
Well, I don't think because it's not the NSG Open's not like a Riot event.
Yeah,
so
I don't think
they would have access to it. Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
So there you go.
So presumably it's on live patch.
All right. Moving on to the next thing. I think we got one more thing in here. Nope, no, we don't. We're moving on. All right,
Cody!
Alliance picked up a women's roster. Sam, give us the quick dosh on that.
So Alliance,
there
you go.
We got it.
Okay, so Alliance have picked up not just a women's roster, they picked up Chatband. Chatband have been looking for an org for so long. They have been like the best unsigned female team in EMEA for months, and they've been like, why has no one picked up this team? So finally, Alliance enters the fray into the female scene, not with just any team, but with Chatband. And this is a ridiculously good team. Like, if you have not been watching Game Changers, you have seriously been missing out. I'm really looking forward to seeing what these ladies can do with the backing of an actual organization. I mean, they were absolutely tearing it up with, like, no resources, no coach, none of that stuff. It was just the five of them doing their absolute best with what they had, and they were killing it. So now with the support of Alliance behind them as well, this is just, it's such good news. I'm so happy for them.
Yeah, I remember casting Pinkley in that one Huntress trial that I subbed in for you. Cracked. She's friggin' insane. Also, what a dope name, by the way. Alliance Coven. Yeah. That's sick.
Hell yeah.
That's sick. Great branding.
So good.
That is fantastic.
Pretty dope. It doesn't really make sense with Alliance, but I'm here for it. Screw it.
But what is a coven but an alliance of witches? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
which is
But
Perfect.
because like G2 Gozen means morning. Like this to me at least makes a bit more sense.
I'm into it. All right, moving on. Let's talk about EU VCT Challengers.
Oh boy.
Challengers.
Fun times, boys.
Should we talk? Let's talk about the bracket first. Heretics out, BDS out, OG out. A bunch of teams you've never heard of because they're pug teams with random names in. How are we feeling about this, Sam?
Ugh.
Kind of. So Hukar is at the top. Danish team. I don't really want to call them like a full-on pug because they have been together for quite a few months. They participated in the Icebox tournament, which was ProMod, who are doing VRL for Northern Europe. And they did really well there. Cracked mechanical players, but kind of need to work on that strategic play a little bit more. They probably came over from CS at some point. Not like pro CS, but just like playing CS. Danish FPS players, it is what it is. So pretty exciting to see them doing really well here. Some also interesting ones. I think it was, what did I say, Big that didn't make it in. They got knocked out by Wave, who Wave have seriously been making waves. This is a team that have been consistently nipping at the heels of tier 1 teams for a few months now. So glad to see that even with a few of the changes and stuff, they're still doing pretty well. Aside from that, yeah, Heretics booming. That was
The
funny.
Heretics game. I watched the XL Heretics game, man. That was a little rough. That was at least on Breeze. The second map was better. But Breeze was their map pick, and I could not figure out for the life of me why.
I'm just loving
like a
seeing some of these
like a
teams from
13-3.
The T2 tournaments, like as I say, Icebox was one that I mentioned. So like
Sure.
Kova played in it. London United played in the Valorant UK and Ireland skirmish, kind of towards the mid of last year. So it's nice to see those teams doing well. Need More DM. That's the Hungarian squad from many months back. It's kind of nice to see. Obviously, it's not the same players, but the name has made a bit of a resurgence, so it's cool to see them out here. And of course, I'm seriously rooting for Yonk, but I think once they hit G2, that's somewhat gonna fall apart. I think given the fact that this is the second qualifier, it's unsurprising to see that there are a lot of like question mark teams, but
Sure.
to see some of those teams going out so early on, like BDS and Heretics, it's a bit of an oof. And now they got to find themselves back in the VRLs. Okay, at least they have an opportunity. You know, EMEA have a unique opportunity here in the VRL, so they can kind of go back to the drawing board. There are still tournaments for them. They can find their way back in.
Right.
But it's not the best. Like, that's not where they wanted to be, yo.
No, not at all. And I mean, you don't want to be they're getting eliminated so early on. Like, I get it. These are open brackets, but like
in stage 2 when all the best teams are out. Yeah.
You're a full salary team. There's already 8 teams removed from the competition. No, more than that, because there's some in the closed. 12 teams removed from the competition.
Something like that, yeah.
And you're losing before you get to the round of 16. Not a great look. Not a good look.
I will say, at least for Heretics, they lost to XL, who have actually looked pretty decent in this second qualifier. For BDS and OG,
not a good look.
great.
No, okay,
Not great.
but for BDS, that Who Cars team is actually really freaking good. Like, really good. I don't know if they should be good enough to beat BDS, but they are really good. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing if they can progress any further today.
This all just brings it back to my dream tournament scenario where you have a tournament bracket where half the teams are signed and half the teams are unsigned. And whenever you beat somebody, you have the option to just take their contracts. It would be the ultimate like battle royale survivor matchup. Like, you can just straight up take their contracts.
OG
That's
lost
a
to
terrible
Young.
idea.
Basically playing for pink slips. That'd be pretty
Wait,
lit.
who lost to Young?
OG did. That was who knocked him out. Was Young.
Young is a good team, yo.
So at least they're not losing to like complete wild cards. But you're still the signed team, right? Like,
there's an expectation,
in most
right?
Of these scenarios.
Yeah, there's an expectation.
And I mean, this is, at least they have, like you said, the VRLs. So like, it's not a case where, all right, well, we don't have to play for 2 months. Let's cut everybody. So there's like room to work around with the rosters, but definitely not the performance any of those teams were hoping for.
No. No.
Oh, I just see Yonk lost their first map 18-16 to another Polish team.
Oof.
The Polish teams, man, we spoke about this at one point, but like they'll come into these qualifiers and they'll do just ridiculously well. They'll get to like a certain point and then suddenly they'll just like fall off the planet. And it's the weirdest thing, and it creates all of these upsets, and it's like, please be consistent. You cannot upset us like this at the start of the tournament and then vanish. So hopefully these Polish teams stick it out a bit longer.
Now let's talk about the other thing that you wanted to talk about here, Sam. Which we all want to talk about. The Valorant EMEA VCT EMEA got a nice little format update. You want to walk us through what happened here, Sam?
So the first thing I want to preface this with, and I said this before the show started, I love how NA and EMEA are kind of ping-ponging between like really weird, stupid shit going on in VCT. So now it's our turn. Basically what happened was, this actually happened in stage 1, I believe, where there were like 2 teams that missed the deadline, and then 2 teams got yeeted out so that those 2 teams could play. Then it happened in stage 2, but at this point there were a ton of teams. There was like, I think there was G2, I know for sure there was OG. I think G2. I'm pretty sure Yonk was one of them as well. So there were quite a few teams that missed the deadline, or not that they missed the deadline, but the spots filled up before the deadline ended, okay? But they weren't quick enough to sign up their teams. So what Valorant did was they yeeted some teams who had already signed up, who didn't miss the deadline, who were there, I don't know, maybe midnight when the signups went live. I don't know, but they were serious about being in the tournament. They got yeeted out so that these signed teams could come in and said, the second screenshot, the first one there, for this reason, we made the decision that if a team signed up late to qualifier 2 and was put on the waiting list, but had previously reached at least round 4 in qualifier 1, the team's position would be manually adjusted so that they would be among the 256 round 1 teams in Q2. Now, I understand why they made this decision. What I don't understand is why they've gone and like retconned the rules after this has happened. Like, oh shit, G2 are not in our qualifier. We need to fix this. Like, what? I mean, having the big teams is also really important for the ecosystem. And we talk about this with invites as well. Like, you want to have the big teams because it brings in the numbers, it brings in the viewers. So on that as well, it makes sense why they made this decision. But it's so stupid that they did this. They announced this after the fact. And I can guarantee you teams didn't know that this was going to be a thing, because the teams that hadn't signed up in time were kicking themselves. They were livid with themselves for not signing up in time. And when this came out, even they were going, what? Like, sure, they're happy to be in it, but like,
thanks, I guess.
And then Yassine made a joke. He was like, there are 2 teams above us on the wait list, something like €200 for you to drop out or something. Obviously, it was a joke. And they did eventually find their way in. I don't know if it was through this or if some teams actually did drop out. But that's the ridiculousness level that we've gotten to. It's dumb.
It really is. This is the decision where if this was the rule set at the beginning, no one would have an issue with it. It makes sense.
They'd known in advance.
But you can't just, I mean, you can, because it's your IP and you can do whatever the hell you want. You can just big dick swing and make things the way that you want them. But it's shitty as hell to do this after the fact, where a team was signed up, they had their spot, and they were ready, and suddenly they don't. Like, that's bullshit. If someone signed up for the thing, fucking reserve slots for like the number of teams that will be eliminated from round 12 on or whatever. Like, just reserve their slot and automatically enter them. Don't do it after the fact and yeet some team out of there. That's just, it's such a
I made this joke before broadcast. Just real quick, I made the joke before broadcast. This feels like 2 months ago when they were deciding on the rule set. They were like, "Do we need to put this rule in?" Now the big teams will be smart enough to actually make sure they sign up in time, right? There's no way big orgs. You make round 4, you're gonna actually sign up in time for VCT. Surely we don't need to include this. Little did they know.
Like, I see the comment in Twitch chat, and I do see the Kappa there, but that was actually something that we'd spoken about. Like, maybe teams thought, okay, we're just going to make it through qualifier 1. We don't have to worry about it. But, like, in all seriousness, you cannot hinge on that. I would far rather sign up for literally everything in advance and then be like, all right, we can't do this because we've whatever, so now we're going to drop out. Rather than be in a situation where we go, oh, I need to be in this thing. Oh, there's no spots left. Could you change the rules? Could you just
Yeah.
could you just
Also-
yeet someone? That'd be great.
But could you imagine too if they like changed the rule set to allow G2 in and G2 didn't make it out of the qualifiers?
I'd laugh a lot.
That would be so funny.
can
I mean,
happen.
they're on. It could happen. They're on
happened
track
with
to make it
OG.
out of the second one. They
OG
didn't
was
make
one
it out of
the
the
teams
first
that
one.
didn't. That's so sad. They were one of the teams that made it to the top whatever in the previous thing, and they didn't make
Sure.
it out. So yeah, I mean, it's already happening. Anyway, good stuff, guys.
Good stuff. Good looks, right? Good looks. Definitely great looks. Definitely doesn't make it look ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. Not a good look. Look, implement the rule now consistently. Don't do it again. Obviously, like just be consistent with it.
In 6 months, when this happens again, we're not going to complain because
If it's the established rule, it's the
there's
established
precedent
rule.
for it
That's
now.
fine. Just
Exactly.
reserve the slots, man. Just reserve
Yeah.
the slots and do
Yeah.
that. All right, moving on here. G2 apparently down on map 2. Please, for the memes. For the memes.
I believe in you, human tripwires.
All right, moving on here. Over to NA, we finally have our VCT format. 9 days before the thing's supposed to begin, they finally published what the
Funny.
hell's actually going to be the thing.
It's such a good format too.
Yeah, except that we only have 2 master slots now. The hell's up with that,
NA
Riot?
boomed. NA boomed.
They took one of our
Y'all
slots.
are dead in the water. You know what? You guys didn't show up at champs. What did you expect?
I was gonna say between Berlin and champs, like it's one of those things where, as an NA fan, I'm like, oh man, why are you doing this to us, Riot? And as like an objective analyst, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that
All
makes
right.
sense.
But the
Yeah,
flip side
sure.
is, if you look at the last year, NA literally won one of the Masters and came
Yeah.
second and another one of the Masters. And then,
Yeah.
flopped to champs. But, shit happens.
Nah.
It's just, if you're looking at the sum total of performance over the year, I don't understand how you dock a slot. I can understand how if you're expanding it, you don't give an extra slot to NA.
Well, because it was like it's 3 for EU, right? For the first Masters
But I mean, we
event.
have a lot more countries.
But it's for
Right,
EMEA.
it's not like tragic, right? It's not like we have
Yeah.
1 compared to 3 or like 2 compared to 4, right? 1 less, considering that NA wasn't the team to win champs. That makes sense.
Or make playoffs.
Hey, Cloud9 exists.
Yeah.
They do.
I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I am curious who gets the new slot. Do we know who gets the vacated slot at this point? Because somebody's getting it. Is it BR? Is it LATAM? Are they just gonna have a new region?
Are they just giving it to EMEA because we won champs?
This slot goes to the nation of Palau and only
wonder-
Palau.
Give it to South Africa, guys. I promise. We will show up.
Let's see. I mean, yeah, you could argue LATAM. You could even argue you could
definitely
SEA.
argue LATAM, to be
Why?
honest. Like
SEA beat out Korea. They had 2 teams in playoffs. They got pretty decently deep in the playoffs, right? Like,
Yeah, I
they
guess
did
it's
all
pretty
right.
interesting.
I mean, I don't think that's the first choice they're gonna go with.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're looking strictly at champs performance, like you did with NA, there was an argument to be, because there were 3 SEA teams at champs, right? There was 1 Korean team. The SEA teams beat out Korea in that APAC last chance, right?
Okay, so we
I don't
have.
know. That's probably a bit of my SEA bias.
Here's our regional distribution that we know of so far. NA's getting 2 slots. Brazil's getting 2 slots. Korea gets 1 slot. EMEA gets to be announced slots. Japan gets to be announced slots. APAC gets to be announced slots. And Latin America gets to be announced slots. That's all based on Wikipedia. So
that was 4 more regions that we don't know.
4 more regions. EMEA are either getting 3 or 4, I would guess. If they get 4, fuck them. But, probably going to wind up with 3. And then the question is, are you buffing APAC, Japan, or LATAM?
I think LATAM.
LATAM makes
Just
sense
because
to
of
me, but
crew.
the thing is,
LATAM does make
Yeah.
sense with how well Crew did.
yeah. It'd be interesting.
Yes.
That'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
Oh, hold
I
up.
think LATAM, if they're
Sorry,
gonna
it's
go
not
off
gonna do
champs
anything.
performance, LATAM is like the one you go with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be curious. That'll be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Crew earned an extra spot for their region.
Someone's saying APAC gets 2. It's already been announced. I'm just going with Twitch chat there. I don't actually know.
Just not a clue.
Be interesting. That'll be interesting. All right. Moving on.
Yeah, I want to talk about the rest of this format though.
Let's
Because,
talk about the rest of the format. Hit me with it, Paul. Hit me with it.
I absolutely love that we get double elim. It kicks in at the round of 32. I think that's perfect, right?
Yeah.
I could not ask for a more perfect thing, because if it was double elim the whole way, that's too many matches. That's too many matches, right? Because it's like 128 teams or something, right? Doing double elim the whole way is just too much. But it kicks in at the round of 32. That means like if you are X good, like you get a second chance, and I think that's perfect. I absolutely love that. And we get 2 qualifiers, which is one more than we thought we were gonna get.
Yeah, we thought we were going to be a single elim 1 qualifier.
Which means,
Praise.
like, you know, again, if you are a good team, even if you flop out once, it's not going to be the situation we were talking about last week, right? Where you can just lose to some cracked kid playing Neon or Rainer or something crazy and just get run over, right? You have like another chance to run through a second bracket, and I think that's absolutely necessary, especially with how many orgs have their hands in NA at this point. How many like the tier 2 orgs that want to get up there, the tier 1 orgs that could flop out of open qualifiers, and we don't have VLR or VRLs for while VCT is going on, right? So if you don't make VCT, you're done for a while, except for like some third-party tournaments. So
unless
I'm
they
super
announce
happy about this
something in the
format.
next couple of weeks, which they might. Like sometimes that
maybe
does
they will.
happen, but
That's certainly possible. They've partnered with like Knights for this event, right? That's coming up the main event starts like tomorrow. So like it's definitely possible that they could like partner with Knights and NSG for like some more third-party stuff. But I'm very happy about the format overall.
Yeah.
I mean, NSG seems to be running Challengers, right? They're at least running the qualifier. I don't think there's been an official announcement of that, but there's a sign-up page. So
there is it was official on the on the official announcement. They say we're partnering with like NSG to run the VCT quals again.
Cool. So then the question is, are they running Challengers itself?
That's a good question.
Probably.
I think so.
We'll find out.
Pretty sure.
We'll find out.
Yeah,
You think we would
find
know
out.
that, but our insights scoops
We don't get to
tell us
know.
That is above our pay grade.
We're kept in the dark.
Exactly.
Kept in the dark. All right. I mean, I think this is a vast improvement over what we thought we were going to get, which was not looking great. So this is a very good qualifier format to the one event. Like you have 2 qualifiers, you have double elim from round of 32 on. Like I'm sure there will still be a heartbreaking miss out, but it's a lot more if you miss out. Like, come on, it's your fault. But
Yeah.
I am just curious about what the big question is. What's the seeding going to look like? Because they say the seeding's going to be on circuit points from last year and recent non-VCT event participation. There's a lot of teams that haven't played shit since last champion or last VCT event, right?
So I imagine they'll wait the last VCT for teams like Gen G, teams like XSET, right? Where it's like they're so in tier 1 they haven't bothered with the third party stuff. But then you look to teams like NRG or stuff like that, they'll go more off the third party seeding, right? That's how I imagine they'll do it.
VLR.
Somebody
Somebody said
said
they're going off
rankings.
VLR.
I think they're probably going to seed it themselves. I think they're probably seeding it themselves.
Wait, is that for
Some of those
VCT?
VLR rankings are a little wild. There's no way they're doing that.
Wait, for VCT? Not a chance.
That's what Com's saying. Com's saying this in chat, but we'll see. We'll see what the seeding winds up being. A crew number 1, no problem
That would
there.
be wild.
A crew number
I mean, to
1
be fair,
seed.
like EMEA seeding, nobody knows how that happened. So I'd be interested to see how NSG are doing it. Maybe they'll do it based on the monthlies.
Keith is also saying that in chat, so maybe that's true. Maybe we're doing the VLR one, which is interesting, using a third-party ranking.
The thing is, so I know that for the Valorant page, Knights used VLR, but they also used some of their own discretion. So it was like, all right, this is VRLs, VLRs. All right, we can kind of like move
VLR and VRL is
there.
really gonna mess us up this year. Huh?
Oh,
It's gonna be so annoying.
All right,
it's gonna be so annoying.
I suffice to say, I think the format's good, and I think we should move on here because, as always, time is of the essence.
Yep.
So moving on here, I think I'm very much more excited for this. Here's the NSG Winter Champs Open 14. We already talked about it a little bit, that there's a T1 The Guard game that's going to happen tonight.
Yeah.
That should be
That looks so good.
Here's the bracket as it is so far. Some of the spicy matchups we had. We had BBG versus T1 in the first round. So T1 win that. Any other really big spicy matchups that you're looking at? Things that were fun?
Pioneers T1 looked interesting, and I'll be honest, I'm a little impressed that T1 came out on top of that one fairly handedly, because Pioneers have been looking really good recently. So that was pretty spicy.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I'm really glad to see Third Impact making a run again. I know this is like a new team, but like the org itself, it's nice to see them kind of getting back in it.
I'm interested to see how Third Impact does. I think the top half, like the left side of this bracket, is definitely weighted less than the right side of this bracket, right? You know, it's harder to get through T1 in the Guard than it is to get through Cloud9 Academy. Not that, not to bash the Cloud9 guys, but there's just precedent there, right? So, I hope we get a good final, but it is looking like the T1 the Guard match is like our early final, right, in the semis. So definitely make sure you guys tune in for that one. That'll be crazy. Shout out to the boys on Elysium, by the way. Thigwerb and Nasi, always got to shout out my collegiate boys. Proud of them for getting so deep in that bracket there.
Is Aircast already off of C9 Academy?
It would not surprise me.
Is he? That game wasn't broadcast, so I couldn't.
That's a bummer. I'm just looking at the VLR.
You're just looking at like who played.
Yeah,
maybe he was busy.
I'll be honest. When I saw him in the last tournament, whichever one that was, because there were a few, he didn't stand out terribly, and maybe it's just because it's like still a fairly new move. I don't know, but
new game.
Was it? Yeah.
I don't know.
It'd be a bit of a pity if they've already just been like, well, you weren't up to scratch and we're not going to give you the time to get there. But I can also understand why a team would do that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the point of an academy team, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
nuts for a Mongolian import too, to just be like, you're off.
That would be strange.
Yeah,
but I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, definitely tune into that T1 the Guard matchup on the G4 channel at 5 p.m. because holy hell, that's going to be a fun one. I'll probably be watching that.
I'm definitely gonna watch it.
I'm gonna be asleep, but I'll catch the VOD.
All right, so that's the Winter Champs Open 14. Very spicy. We'll see who actually wins it. That'll be really interesting. My gut says whoever wins out of T1 the Guard wins the thing.
That's how it should go, right?
Yeah,
like on paper.
Expectation.
Like not to bash Illusion or Third Impact, but the precedent is that Guard or T1 should be winning it.
Guys,
right?
G2 is down 12-5 against Human Tripwires, apparently.
Gonna go to a match.
Let's go. G2 elimination. G2 elimination.
Oh my.
Team Chaos. Woo!
Oh, that is amazing.
All right.
Anyway.
Now let's talk about the Night's Valorant page, because that's something that we really do want to talk about. Some qualifiers going on for that right now. This is going to be...
Well, the qualifiers are over.
Oh, qualifiers are over. This is going to be a very interesting event, I would say. Obviously, we've got agent bans coming in. So, yeah. Who are you excited for? Who are you looking at here, Sam?
This is such a big tournament.
You're really excited for?
So obviously a crew, I mean, we've been talking about them the last couple of weeks. They've been looking really hot in the NA scene. And obviously this is a little bit more of a challenge because of the pick and ban thing. Now I did get clarification. The protects and the bans is per series, not per map. So you really have to like look ahead. If you're obviously it's best of threes, you're not sure if you're going to go to 3 maps. You're not 100% sure what those 3 maps are going to be because you still have to go through like the pick and ban process there. So, and what I mean is like when you're planning ahead, when you're planning like the day before, okay, what are we going to do? You don't know necessarily what the team for 100% sure is going to be banning out. Then you still have to think about what agent. So there is a little bit of a curveball in there. And I think that that's what I love so much about this tournament is that it's really forcing teams to think further than what they have before. And what's really exciting as well is that there's some really top names in here. You know, version 1, TSM, NRG. There's some big teams to really test your mettle against in a very, very interesting format.
Is TSM actual going to be in it? I only saw Academy listed.
Oh shit, you're right. It's Academy, but still.
Okay. Still, I mean TSM, right?
I mean,
it's the more
TSM Academy.
TSM.
No, but TSM Academy is better than TSM. So like.
Well, I mean, TSM doesn't have a full 5, so yes.
Yeah. I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with the crew, right? That's the story I'm watching. C9 should on paper obviously be taking the event, but also it's like right before VCT and it's protect bans, so I'm not sure. Like, you know, I doubt they're going to use too much of their playbook. Although they have a month off, so you know maybe they actually they don't have to get through the qualifiers. So maybe they'll come out with some heat. I can't get behind protects and bans as of yet.
Not yet,
Just
yeah.
as a concept.
I'm so into it.
I was talking about the. I like. Eventually I'll like it, but right now, especially with protects, right? Like I think we'll get to the point where there'll be enough agents in Valorant where we can do away with protects and just go straight to bans. But right now, there's just like a few agents where, depending on the map, like you just change the entire game if you can play them or not, right? Like Sam, you were talking to us before the show about like a lot of the stats in the open qualifier. It's like Sova and Astra being two of the most protected agents. You're always going to protect those two if you don't have some sort of weird niche strat that revolves around not having them. And even if you do have that weird niche strat, the other team is going to protect them. So the game doesn't fundamentally change enough without those agents out. And even if you, for some reason, they fall through, right? And neither of them get protected, right? And they get banned, then it's just going to come down to whose weird niche strat that they've been scrimming or they just thought of on the fly wins on the day, right? I think it's too coin flippy on one side of the spectrum and then absolutely not game-changing whatsoever on the other side. Because, with those two banned, arguably, you can throw maybe like Viper in there as well. But agents where on specific maps, they will change the game. Yeah. Right? Like if you go to Breeze or Icebox without Viper, that is a different game. If you go to Ascent without Astra, that's a different game. Sova on any map except Split, that's a different game. Right? And then if those ones are protected, then Sky ban, cool, we'll just play KO. KO ban, we'll play Sky. Chamber or Killjoy ban, we have other Sentinels. At that point, it just becomes one player is maybe slightly uncomfortable for the game, but not much else changes.
Yeah, I want to get rid of the protects. Full chaos. Just straight ban.
Maybe like
people.
one protect each instead of two.
No ban, no protects. Just straight up Astra out of there. Sova,
I think you do no protects and you ban each map, right? You get one ban each map. I think that's the way to do it.
Congratulations,
but also, I don't think
Sova.
that's the way to do it right now because then you just get Sova and Astra banned all the time.
Yes.
And,
see if Valorant players can, in fact, clear corners without wall hacks. Let's find out.
Should we start doing like cascading picks? Because I think they're bringing that into ranked. So maybe we should start bringing that into like competitive as well.
I mean,
so every team gets a ban and then you start cascading. That could be cool.
I think it'll follow, what people do in League and that kind of thing. I don't know. I think this could be really interesting. I think that it's going to be. I think that obviously we're not going to see bans come in before, I would say, end of year, right? Like that's when it would logically
in like
make sense to
VCT.
bring it in.
Nah.
Yeah, when you have enough agents in there to think about it. If you're Riot, bringing it in, but
sure, we'll get like 4 or 5 more agents this year probably because they're pumping one out every 2 months.
But I think it's going to be delicious chaos for this tournament and make this tournament really interesting, especially considering it's a 32-team tournament. Like, it's a big Mamba Jumba. So you're going to have a lot of data to scrape, to think about, to be able to work through this. And it's going to be some really spicy matchups as well. And some good pulse checks going into VCT, right? Some really good pulse checks there.
Which is clearly the idea.
Yeah.
And it's cool because it's like a pulse check, but it's not like the protects and bans make it outside the equilibrium enough to where it's not like if somebody flops out of this tournament, we're going like, they're going to lose everything in VCT. And VCT is also around the corner. So, a lot of these teams aren't going to be using their full strat book, to say the very least.
Yeah.
So it's like a cool, like, okay, we can see how these teams interact and maybe get some juicy storylines for VCT bracket.
If you guys want some like cool stats and insights, I think Anders time zones are hard, so I don't know if he has actually released it or if it is yet to release, but he has made an entire video about the picks and bans, and I mean, he's one of the biggest brains I know, so if you want to hear more about that, you can go check that out on his YouTube. Friend of the show, so shout out.
We do love Anders. Let's see.
We do.
6 hours ago.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
so
nice.
Yep, it's out.
So go check that out. More in-depth information on that.
Go take a look.
Interesting.
Go take a look for sure. But I think that this is, to your point, Paul, because this tournament is different enough, if you're a team that loses, you're going to go, it didn't matter. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
and if
exactly.
you win, you'd be like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, we're great. Yeah.
A
like-
crew ends up winning this, and that they are riding that momentum
Oh,
through
hell yeah.
VCT, dude.
Hell yeah. Not
Dude,
dropping
I'm
the
having
series again.
flashbacks to Sentinels and seeding games. That's all I'm saying.
It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see. We'll see how they
Yeah.
actually do with it. This is going to be a very informative tournament for the future, I would say, in a few different
Yeah.
ways. But the actual result of this, it's going to be tough to like know exactly how much weight to give it. But the general, I think, trends coming out of this tournament are going to be really interesting to look at for the
Sure.
future going forward. Also, Sam's casting it, so you should watch.
Yes, I am. I'm casting on tomorrow night, in fact, day one, and I'll be casting the grand final. So that's gonna be pretty good.
Ooh, spicy.
Very spicy.
Yeah.
So be sure to tune in for those grand finals and day one, and then none of the rest of it. No. It should
Yes,
be a fun tournament
pretty
to
much.
watch. I think that's going to wrap up our show here, unless anyone else has anything else spicy to talk
We're
about.
almost on time.
I mean, theoretically, we're a half-hour show, so we're only 40 minutes over.
we have never
Since
been a
when?
half-hour show.
We've been an hour
We've
show for a
never.
long time. We were theoretically once upon a time a 30-minute show. Com says if we lose, it was lag. The classic pro excuse.
There
Blame
you
jet
go.
lag.
Love it.
Wait, that doesn't
Love
work.
Jet lag.
Anyway.
But
That's going to wrap up
Blame
our
the
show.
client
Thank you so
service.
much for tuning in. There is a Winter Championship Open tonight, 5 p.m. Watch that T1 versus the guard matchup because that's going to be spicy as hell. I'm really curious to see how that one's going to go. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to tune in every week at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's when we air here on this channel. You can give the channel a follow. You can give Nerd Street a follow on Twitter as well. We'll bully them into tweeting about us again at some point. Thank you so much. See you next week. Goodbye, everybody.